All right, here we go. So, how's your practice?
So yes, I wanted to tell you a couple of things about it. First is the practice of pausing when getting up from a chair.
Uh-huh.
It's very interesting because I felt like it was nearly impossible at first. Well, I would always remember about it only about 5 minutes after I would get up, which, but I still congratulated myself because I remembered, just a little bit later.
Yes.
And then miraculously, I was able to remember more and more. Um, so that's pretty cool.
Yes, that's called
And
skill development. Exactly so.
And I even tried it on my husband. We were at a restaurant, and I told him, I'm doing this thing where I try to remember to, pause when you get up, and it's kind of tricky. And you know what he did? I totally forgot to do it when we got up from our table at the restaurant, but he remembered.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh.
So he's more advanced than me.
And I wouldn't call it that. You can call it beginner's luck also. Or you could look at it from a position of got ya.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to tell you was, how sometimes you mentioned that um, you would something would happen and you would think, oh, I used to react a certain way to this type of situation, but I no longer do. But I remember how I would react. So this thing happened to me actually. Someone was acting very mature and kind of irritable, and
Mm-hmm.
before I would definitely take that personally and kind of confront the person, start a little fight,
Mm-hmm.
conflict. But this time I remembered your, zip it head. So I totally did that. And and of course the situation was like completely not about me at all. The person was just having a bad day, and like an hour later the person was fine. And it just, I could have blown it out of proportion, that how, I would used to do that.
that's really, really excellent. Thank you for telling me about that. That the old habit patterns of the mind are to be on defense, to be in protective mode. And so we will then perceive the bad feelings of others as if it were an attack on us, where in fact it was not at all. But with one's right noble view, we can see both sides of those things happening at the same time, and we recognize, oh no, there's no reason to be upset. The other person is just doing what they're doing, and it's not related to me. But we tend to take everything selfishly, take everything personally, I guess.
Yeah, that was a great situation because I could actually see and observe in practice.
Mm-hmm. I've got a friend here. In fact, I've got several friends, three in fact.
Nice.
And one of them is named Tun, who lives at Wat Suan Mok. He's an old friend, and that he's actually written a book
Oh,
uh, on that one thing about don't. And the name of the book is "Don't Take Anything Personally." And so that's exactly what you're talking about here: is don't take that stuff personally. But it takes a wake up, and it takes right effort then to not take it personally, because the old habit is to take things personally. And so that's good. Congratulations. You're beginning to wake up.
and otherwise, in sitting meditation, I've been kind of going through this sleepy spell where I would sit for, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, and all of a sudden I just feel like I just have to take a nap. And then the rest of the sit would be napping. How do you feel about that, letting just yourself sleep sometimes?
One of the things that can happen with that is that um, it's hard for some people to remember the actual instructions, especially the most basic instructions of all. In other words, we tend to want to start again, but we want to jump back up somewhere high on the ladder that where we've fallen off from. So we've got an expectation I should be up there. But always the best way to practice is always start again at the very bottom, as if the right way to reclimb a ladder you've fallen off of is to go back to the beginning rung and take one step at a time. And in this case, the first step of Anapanasati is that long breath, which means that if the mind gets kind of tired and sleepy, it may be due to the fact that the breathing has gotten shallow and going in the direction of not getting enough air. And so one of the things that you can the first thing to experiment when you recognize that there's any drowsiness there is to start taking a few deep breaths.
Okay, I'll try that.
With perhaps even with the thought or with the thought that would be verbalized as drowsiness. I see you. I know what you are. And then you take that deep breath as kind of a response to recognizing that tiredness or drowsiness is there. And after you take a few deep breaths, if the drowsiness remains, then there are other things to do that the Buddha actually recommends. One is to rub the arms. Another one is to rub the face, especially if you've got water. So at home, you can actually go and splash water on your face and then go back and sit down. If that doesn't work, then sure, for a nap. Don't try to meditate when you know that you're drowsy and can't get out of it, pushing your way through it. Say, I'm going to sit here. That kind of effort is not right effort. And so if you're really tired, sure, take a nap. That's the right thing to do. But in the beginning, when you start to get tired, it may be simply because the brain is just not getting enough oxygen.
Yeah, it's possible.
Mm-hmm. And so taking a few deep breaths will start to waken up the mind. That's in fact why we want to practice on a regular basis this combination of very, very deep breathing, fill up the lungs, having a really beautiful relaxed sigh as you let that out, and do that several times. It gets the body oxygenated, and it also helps purify the lungs. It helps clean the blood, in fact. This is well known. One of the examples that I sometimes use is that we know that there is more than just carbon dioxide and water vapor coming out in the exhale, because neither carbon dioxide nor water vapor have an odor. Now, most of what we call bad breath is really associated higher up. Tooth rot, decay, all kinds of other stuff. But there is a certain kind of odor or smell that comes out of the breath. An example, in fact, would be when people are angry, they stink. And that part of the reason that they stink is because of their breathing. First off, they're breathing heavily when they're angry, and that the whole body is giving off chemicals, mostly from the breath. And so by breathing deeply, we're not only reoxygenating the blood, but we're kind of purifying the blood. And so these long, deep breaths are very, very beneficial. And it will bring you out of drowsiness if that's the reason. It could also be the reason that, let us say, that you were breathing properly, but you were practicing meditation for a longer period than you had been before. So the brain is actually kind of a muscle. It's a different kind of muscle, but it has all the qualities of a muscle, including exercise makes it strong. but exercise also destroys it in the sense of having to rebuild. So we get tired after doing a new task more so than after we've gotten used to doing that task. Well, right now you're working on a brand new skill set of Sati, which is basically energizing and activating the most human part of the brain, bringing that frontal cortex up to function. Now, humans, especially those that have intellectual jobs and say, oh no, well, I use the frontal cortex all the time. The reptilian brain cannot to do the kind of math that I have to do on a spreadsheet. Yes, that's true. And so in that regard, that part of the brain is also useful in that way, but we're putting it to a new use. And that new use is to come and to be here now and to be with the body and to watch the body. And that by watching the breath, we also start to exercise and energize that frontal cortex, just like a muscle. And so the best exercise, by the way, is very similar to the kind of exercise that you would do in a gym. For instance, you're doing dumbbells and you're curling them like this. Bringing it up and getting it high one time is not exercise. You have to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And every time that you do it, you both weaken and build up the muscle. Weaken it because of the energy, let us say the glucose, the sugars, and the chemicals that are working with those break down and then are leached out of the cell wall. This is why people who have not been fighting very much, in other words, got no skill at all, and they'll get into a fist fight, they'll be able to have a brawl for about 10 or 15 or 20 seconds at best. But a martial artist who is training and training and training, he can go for a much longer time, but not very long. Maybe he can last about 5 minutes at best, and then it's over. All right. Why is that? Because the muscles get tired, they break down all of this activity, but then over time, all of that stuff is cleaned out, and the muscle systems are now improved. And so going to a gym, if you don't exercise enough, you're not getting much value out of it. But if you over exercise, that means that the next day the muscles are going to get really, really tired. Well, that same thing is true in the sitting meditation. If you're sitting too long, longer than your training has got, let's say that you sit for 30 minutes or 30 minutes and you're good to go for 30 minutes every time that you sit down, and now you're going to sit for an hour today. That second 30 minutes is going to be a completely different experience than the first 30 minutes, because the first 30 minutes you've already been training for that, and that's good to go. But in that second 30 minutes, now the mind is probably going to get tired. The brain's going to get tired from this constant be here now, come back, throw that stuff out of the brain, throw that stuff out of the mind, get rid of those hindrances and come back and come back. That's actually effort. The Buddha calls it right effort. And taking on this right effort then is almost like pumping up. It's almost like exercise like this. It really is. It's the same part of the quality of the way that the human body works. But that's good news. That's really good news. That means that when the mind gets tired, instead of saying, oh, naughty mind, you should not get tired, I think that you should be able to do this solidly all the time. Well, no, that's not the case. That we recognize that the mind gets tired, and we congratulate ourselves for seeing that it's tired now, and now we can do something different about it. Now, let us say that after the mind begins to get really trained like this, that old monks can stay, let us say, talking in a Dhamma talk for a long time and stay focused and stay clear. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa on a regular basis on the full moon of the Paddy Mork. He would start talking at about 2 a.m. and he would continue to talk until sunrise, which was sometime after 5:30 in the morning, depending upon what time of year it was. So he's good to go for 3.5 hours, and he does it straight. And they still play those tapes, so they're really, really good things that he stays with it. Now, that's also the encouragement that if we can get the mind fit for work and keep exercising it like that, then the stronger it becomes, then the longer lasting it will be in that strong tape before it gets tired. And I also recognize that in some cases when I have a lot of students on a particular day, especially since I've got 3 right here in my pocket, and I have 3 or 4 other students on the internet, I can see that, yeah, finally the mind has gotten so tired that it's just better to shut up and go away. So the mind, that can happen also when people change jobs. That when we change jobs, that first week at that new place we can get really tired in the afternoon because this is a new job and we got a lot of things to learn. But after a month or 2, now we're in the flow and we don't get tired at work the way that we did when we had that new job. That's another example of what we're talking about. Just as simply the way that the mind itself is organized, built, and that knowing these things, we put it to our advantage rather than suffering under it because we don't know what's going on. So this is the issue about tiredness. The first thing, take a few deep breaths. Recognize, do those breaths actually wake you up? Watch for that to see if it helps. You can also stimulate the arms, rubbing the arms. What that does is that when we're sitting and not watching too much, first off to tell you, unlike many mammals that are covered with hair, the human being is not covered with hair. And because of that and other things for protection, that the brain itself, the nerve cells themselves started to populate throughout the human body so that the human body has a density of neurons throughout the body in a much different ratio than a dog does. An example of that is dogs can get covered with fleas or they can get covered with ticks and they can just handle it. If a human being is covered with ticks or fleas, it'll drive them mad because of all of the irritating sensations that they have and they want to get rid of it. But dogs are kind of fine with it because they don't have that neurological intensity that the humans do. So with that, what we mean is by rubbing the arm, you're actually physically stimulating the brain. Isn't that weird? Rubbing the arms will stimulate things. It'll get those neurons going, and that kind of wakes up the mind. In fact, careful noticing after you rub your arms that you could feel kind of a sensation like electricity or something shoot right up the back. Do that when you're sitting and you feel getting tired. When you rub the arms, the whole body becomes kind of electrified or energized, especially up through the shoulder areas and the back and all that. In the Pali language, we call this piti. And that basically what we're talking about is that it's sensations that can be enjoyable that arise in the body, that there is actually pleasure in the body. And that pleasure can be experienced in many, many ways. This is one of the reasons, in fact, why Buddhism or the old Buddha statues can see this. What I'm getting around to talking about is what they call hand postures. The Pali word would be mood. Mu is the word for hand, and mudras means the position or the posture of the hands. So one of the meditation postures is to fold your hands like this, and then the thumbs. And the thumbs can be used for sensation, touching, like this or like this. But let's go back to a simpler one. This is also one of the mudras. Now, what the advantage of that mudra is the touch between the thumb and the index finger. To notice which is giving you the sensation. When they touch each other, do you feel the thumb or do you feel the index finger? Because they're separate neurons, but they all go together. The other one, which is more difficult, is that when you touch the thumbs, which one do you touch? Which one do you feel first? Which thumb is it, or are they both together? All right, this is something to investigate. Here's something else with that, and that is that this system of neurons that we have don't end their sensitivity at the surface of the skin. That the human being is, the body of a human being is almost like an antenna. And we've known this for a long time, that people who are in a city, that if they're about to get mugged, the hair will stand up on the back of their neck right before that gun gets put into their back. Something about the human body knows the surroundings, that we're very much aware of this, but it almost appears magical in the sense that people can sense stuff and pick stuff up that we don't know how they pick it up. But it must be magic, or it must be, let us say, a magical mental development. But really what's going on is that the people become attuned to their body so that they pick up subtle vibrations. Sometimes the vibrations are very low frequency, and the ears only go down to about 20 cycles. But when a truck comes in, it also makes a lot of noise, but the very, very low frequencies of the way that it touches and moves across the ground itself and presses the ground down, those are very low frequencies, and so you can tell. In fact, the elephants, because of their large, large feet and the softness of the underpad of the feet, the elephants can stand and hear with their feet things in the ground, and that one of the things that they'll listen for is their herd of elephants. And that because they've got a stereoscopic way, because of all of the 4 feet, it's very stereoscopic, so they can actually see which direction that herd is moving. And as that herd moves that direction, the elephant who's sensing that 5-10 miles away can then go in to where he knows he's going to meet up with them. He doesn't try to go where they are now. He'll go where he can detect that they're moving to. And that's quite amazing. That's mind-blowing that elephants can hear, but they're not hearing with their ears as big as their ears are. They're hearing with their feet. But we can do that too. Humans have that same capability. All we have to do is pay attention to it. But to do that, we have to really be here now. We can't be thinking about Aunt Susie and this and being sensitive to this stuff. This is all the kinds of, let us say that the body becomes an enormously interesting plaything. The human body is such an amazing thing. But we've gotten used to not paying attention to it. We've just put it to use as if it was a machine that to be put to use rather than to be experienced. And so now the frame of reference is, instead of putting the body to use, you're going to put it to something to be looked at, to experience, to be enjoyed, playing with the sensations of the hands, watching how you move your hands, the intention behind the movement of the hands. Why did I move my hand? Start looking at the subtleties in there. Start watching the touch of the fingers when you're sitting. If you're going to do this one, then begin to feel the touch of the index finger and the thumb. Another one is you can do while your eyes are closed, or slowly bring your thumb and your index finger together until you can feel them. Then you open your eyes and you realize they haven't touched yet. And so by playing with that, you begin to expand that awareness. You begin to kind of tune that antenna, or become in tune with that antenna that is the body, so that we begin to pick up things that are quite remarkable. That you begin to sense things, literally, with that sense of touch. That sense of touch expands. And so the body is really important. The third step of Anapanasati is to experience the whole body. But one of the things that's quite remarkable is that the first two items of Anapanasati uses the word understand. That one takes in a deep, long breath, and one understands that they're taking a deep, long breath. And we begin to investigate that long breath. And then we breathe out, and we sigh, and we experience that long breath as it comes out. And then we begin to also work with the shorter breath to see what it's feeling like to do normal breathing. But the third step of Anapanasati and all of the rest of the points of Anapanasati, the verb is train, skill development. And the third one is to experience the whole body. But it's a training. We have to train to experience the whole body. And so the opportunity that you will use with that is when the mind gets really dull, after you've been doing some practice for a while, 15, 20 or more minutes, and the mind gets dull and you know it, then that's the time to rub those arms and then experience what the body feels like after you do that. It really wakes up the body. It's an amazing thing. It's also with the face. Washing the face with water really tends to wake us up. In movies, when somebody's been knocked out as unconscious, taking a bucket of water and splashing on them, and all of a sudden they're awake, that's actually real. That happens. If you really want to wake somebody up in a hurry, throw water on their face. And that's a real wake up. So these are the kinds of things that you can deal with dullness, but we're also beginning to put into context this Anapanasati of the be here now in the sense of the body. So incorporating that with when you get up out of a chair and you stand, experience the body standing. Doesn't take long, just one breath or so. And then you recognize, oh, there's that intention. The intention was to go do something. The intention was to go get a drink of water, go to the bathroom, go to turn that electric device on, turn the light switch, or whatever like that. So we note, why did we get up? Because you know that it's quite possible that people can jump up out of the chair, run into the room, and then say, why did I come in here? So now with this technique, we're making sure that we know what our intentions are. I think the worst case of it is what we call refrigerator door. Here the meditator is sitting on the floor in his meditation. He's finally doing his thing and he's watching his breath. And the next insight he has, the next mindfulness he has, he's already gotten up and walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator door. And now he's standing in front. Wait a minute, I was sitting in meditation and now I'm in front of the refrigerator. This can happen when the mind gets tired and we don't know it. When the mind gets tired, it's almost like a gap can happen in 5, 10, 20 seconds can go by without any mindfulness at all. But then we recognize, oh yeah, here I am again. Mindfulness has returned. I'm going to shut that refrigerator door and happily walk back and sit down and say, I caught you. It took me a while, but I caught you, Mr. Refrigerator Door. And so this is the way that we start to practice with the body, to know that the body is a living breathing sensation machine that is to be experienced in the here now. And so the body is a very, very excellent tool for the training to be here now. You can't watch last year's breath. You cannot watch next month's breath. The only one we can watch is the one we're having right now. And so this is the way for you to start managing drowsiness and working with the body and recognizing that there is exercise. There'll come a time when it's just too tired and you got to quit. So all of these things that I've been telling you have to do with, again, mindfulness, to be awake to what's happening and to watch closely, to see what's going on. I think that's really funny that you told your husband about it when you were out to dinner, and then you stood up and he caught you and you didn't.
Yeah, you remembered to do it, and I totally didn't. Because about 20 minutes passed, or 30 minutes, I was totally...
But you see what that will do, and you probably have already got it, is that gives you a new determination. Okay, I'm going to do it next time. I'm not going to have to be reminded by my husband. I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
So since that time, I bet you've gotten very good at it.
Much better, yes.
Yes.
But I was impressed with his skill. Because I know it's not easy, like in the beginning.
Right. In the beginning, right effort does take effort. As we develop the skill of right effort, it becomes easier and easier. You can also talk about it using language like we get used to doing it. We get used to it. Same thing about taking on a new job. In the first week or two, we get really tired, but then later we get used to it. You could also talk about the guy who goes to the gym. The first day, he can barely do 5 kilos with 10 reps. But he keeps going back to the gym. He gets used to doing it. So that used to, the way that we use it in English language, is actually skill development. When we get used to something, that means we developed a skill.
Right. Oh, I wanted to tell you how amazed I am actually with the body stuff. I think, you know, there is a poet, Mary Oliver. She died, I think, a couple of months ago. She has a poem that goes something like, let the soft animal of your body do what it loves to do. So sometimes I tell kind of like my body, I give it an instruction. So now relax. And let's say I'm sitting at work and I just watch what it does. I don't control it in any way, but it starts like, you know, the neck goes like this and the shoulders move and then it kind of like softens, but it does it all on its own. Like you give it an intention and it has its own like programming, and it's very smart. Like,
yes, the body is very smart. The body is part of the brain. It's very smart.
But you can kind of take a step back and just watch. You don't know what it's going to do, but it knows how to do it.
Yes, exactly. The body does know how to relax. In fact, if people were not able to relax, even people who you would consider the most uptight people and unrelaxed people you know, if they cannot relax, at least while they're in bed at night, if they cannot find any time of relaxing, they'll burn up, they'll die in just a few short years. No, everybody, even those who would be considered uptight by all of their friends, do have times where the body does relax. Mostly it happens only for them in sleep, because it's only then when their mind is not tensing the body. And so when they're asleep, now the body can finally relax. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about it in the following way, but I like to use there was an old television series called All in the Family, and the head of the family was Archie Bunker, who was a very, very racist, redneck bigot from the 1970s. He called his son-in-law meathead and this kind of stuff. But it was a send-up of right-wing, low-class factory workers. But the story is that Archie comes home after work, takes his really heavy coat off because he lives in New Jersey, throws it on this chair, and then sits down in his easy chair. That's a little Nibbana moment. Now, Archie himself may not know that, but these kind of people who are uptight, angry, bigoted attitudes like that, even they, when they sit down in their easy chair, can have a Nibbana moment. And if he doesn't have those Nibbana moments, so the stress that he's putting on himself will kill him. Everybody needs these little moments of rest every day. So what you can do is you can start to exaggerate that when you find those moments. So just like standing up with intention, to know your intention by standing and not go from sitting to walking posture, but to go through that intermediate step of standing. Now the next thing is that when you sit down in your chair, do a really, really solid sit down in the sense of a complete relaxation, like, ah. So every time you sit down, you just sit everything down, ah, like that, with a huge, beautiful out breath. And every time you sit down in the chair, you remember to do that. And these are little points of mindfulness, because for some reason, the Western people, and even some people in Asia, have the idea that all of the mental training to be done is to be done on the sitting posture in what they call meditation, to where in fact the Buddha uses that in the sense of being secluded. He uses the analogy of a log in a bog. Have I told you about the log in the bog? Yes, okay. So we use the sitting meditation so that we can get away from it all and make our mindfulness training easy. We're trying to make it easy by taking away as much distractions as we can. But that's not going to do us any much good to just sit on the floor. We've got to bring that mindfulness and that skill that we're developing out. And so the more we sit doesn't necessarily mean that the better our life is going to be, that we've got to start taking those same practices that we were doing in seclusion and now start doing them throughout the day. I use the analogy of busking. Do you know what the word busking means? They have a lot of busking done in New York. And that is musicians who learn how to play by sitting in the privacy of their own home by doing their practice. Now they'll take that guitar or that saxophone out on the street, and they start doing it out on the street. It has enormous value to it. One of the things, if there's nobody around, if there's the guy is just sitting there or standing there alone, then he can actually practice. Because he's got no place to go. He's standing here on the street, he's got his guitar, he might as well practice. But when somebody comes up, that practice somehow just almost immediately with the next note, it starts to become a performance. Now he's playing for someone. And maybe he gets a nickel or a quarter in his hat or something like that. And then the person goes by and now he's back to practice. So they move from practice to performance like this. And that is what gets them ready then for a real performance, so that they can go out on stage in front of 10,000 people and not freak out. That's one of the things that musicians have to do, is they have to deal with an audience. Well, guess what? Everybody has to deal with an audience all the time. The Shakespeare says, all the world is a stage, and every one of us is an actor on that stage. Every one of us is performing. So in that world of performance, we take the practice of Anapanasati off the cushion and start performing it throughout the day. And the exact things that we're doing is taking that moment. Between the time we sit, the time we stand, that's a point of mindfulness. Every time we sit down with great joy and ease, and that's a point of mindfulness. We can also extend that to the hand so that every time that we reach, we become mindful. So that we're about to pick up something, we reach, but now instead of reaching it with the normal way of doing it, we slow it down. By slowing it down, that's exactly the same thing as when we stand up, we stop, because that takes a new kind of mindfulness, a new kind of effort to not just grab something because we want it, but now, so an example of this is that it's on the table, and when I come to get it, I want to do it with, it's almost like Nosferatu or Dracula. Have you seen the Dracula movies that when he's about to grab the girl's throat, his hands will go up like that with the strange music? Okay, this is the kind of thing that we're beginning to look at, is that when you grasp something, you go, and then when you touch it, the very first point that your fingers or hand touches that object, you want to make a note of that. And then make a note of how the hand sensations of the touch of the object changes the feelings of the hand, so that we know we've got the object because we can feel it. In this regard, I can feel it with this finger, I can feel it with this finger, I can feel it with the hand, I can feel it with the thumb, I can feel it all over. So the whole hand is grasping that item. So now, eventually, we're going to set that item down. When we set it down, we kind of do it in exactly the reverse order. We put it down on the table, and then we slowly start feeling the feeling sensations as we release the object, and making note of the last thing, in this case, the touch of the thumb. And then when we withdraw like Dracula does, very slowly. And this will teach you a lot about movements of the hands and mindfulness and slowing down and all kinds of stuff. But basically what it is a training system to be here now more and more frequently throughout the day. That the real benefits of the Dhamma is not sitting on the floor. That's just a practice session. We've got to perform this stuff. And so we got to become mindful throughout the day by performing these little techniques or tools that I'm giving you. And there's a wide variety of them. One would be, make sure that you know when you're touching your body with your hands, why you're doing it. What is the itch? If there is an itch, watch the itch for a little while before you scratch it. Decide whether you're going to let that itch go or whether you're going to scratch it. Sometimes like here in the tropics, with the really, really hot weather we've had, the dogs are just covered with ticks. We've done everything. We bought products, we give them baths and everything, but the house now is full of ticks. And you can feel them crawling on you. If they come on your skin, you have to be really aware of it so you get that tick off, because you don't want it to bite. If you bite it, then it'll be a real issue. But you want to become aware of animals. We have a lot of insects. We have mosquitoes. We have flies. We have gnats. We have, in fact, we've got such a wide variety of things that a lot of Western people, they do not like being around, living in literally a forest in the tropics, because we are just covered with wildlife. So we have to know what's on the body. We can't just completely ignore it. If there is a crawling sensation, in other words, you can actually feel something move from here to there, it's probably a tick. And so we want to inspect that area, and I can inspect it with either feeling of my hand, of digging for it if it's on the back, or I can just take a look and see if it's there. But anyway, this is the whole point, is to start waking up to the body. Now, in really, really cold climates, what happens is we begin to layer on a whole lot of clothing. That clothing then almost is like a blindfold. But it's still useful, because in the shirt that you're wearing, you can feel the touch of the cloth. When you're breathing, you can feel the rise and the fall and the touch. You can feel the neck of the shirt. When it's there, because it's extra cloth heavy work to keep the shirt. You without even touching it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can feel that place where that shirt is on your neck. this is the kind of thing that we can do with clothing. But if I've got students who are in the tropics, I recommend that they are in a warm place, that they sit in meditation without clothing, or as little clothing as possible. We want to be modest. We don't want to make a scene, but taking as much clothing off as possible to get as much skin exposed to the air as possible to start helping it to wake up. So this is something to start looking at, is with the whole idea here with what we call Kaya Nupassana, the knowledge of the physical body. We want to do all of these techniques to help wake that body up, to pay attention to the fact that the body is just covered with neurons, and that these neurons have sensory awareness that goes beyond the actual impression of a touch, that the air itself impresses us, that trucks rumble the ground, and that ground then comes up just like with the elephants. Now the elephants are really excellent at it, and they use it as a tool. For us, it also is there, but we're completely unaware of that until we start paying attention and start to wake that up. One of the stories that I have heard is that little children don't have the ability to shut this down. That the experience of being a young child is the experience of being overwhelmed and bombarded with sensory input. And so part of the education of a child that the child gives themselves is learn to pay attention to some things and not pay attention to other things, to try to suss out what's worthy of paying attention to and what's not. And in that regard, children begin over time to shut down and not listen to what the body is saying, especially if they're trained in Western things. Now, here's something that's very interesting that they're looking into, and that is autism. It looks like that part of the issue with autism is that the child is not capable of making those maps the way that ordinary children do, so that they are not capable of using the map to block out a lot of sensory awareness. And that the autistic child will feel completely overwhelmed with sensory awareness. And so you can see the reason that they see that is because they can see the autistic child will do this, and they'll start to rock, but they're either covering their ears, they don't want to hear, it's too much work, and they're covering their eyes, they want to withdraw from sensory awareness. All right. Well, those of us who have been successful at withdrawing from the overwhelming sensory awareness are now got the opposite trouble, and that is that now we're not paying attention to our sensory awareness. It's time to wake it back up again as adults. And so this is what that third step of Anapanasati is to develop the skill of paying attention to the body. Now, surprisingly enough, women are actually better at doing that than men are. And because of that, it's actually a very useful thing for women to really develop that skill, because they're already fairly good at it, better than men. So really, really pay attention and develop that skill, because you'll begin to see that a lot of the knowledge of sensory input that you get does not come from just the eyes and the ears. It comes from the body. One of the examples of that I've played other than a toy, but the game or a game, and the game is that it's my job to know the job of the dog before the dog does, in the regard of territory. So if anybody comes on the property, I want to know it before the dogs know it. That's the goal. But that really starts to wake things up, so that when Tam comes, even she's 50 yards away, and is still out on the road and completely hidden by the stuff that's in, still I will know it. it's hard for her to get on, even onto the property. By the time she's on the property, I already know she's there. But this is a skill to be developed using that sensory awareness. Everybody can do this. This is not necessarily a unique or magical power. It's just that humans are sensitive in ways that we don't give ourselves credit for. We don't develop that. That in fact, in childhood, we shut it down because it was too much. So now we're going to wake that back up. And how we're going to do that? Well, every time you stand up, every time you sit down, every time you grasp, every time you touch, we become more and more aware of the sensory world around us. When we're sitting in meditation, especially without cloth, we can feel the air on the body, the subtle movements of the air in the room. We can begin to pick those up. But in fact, what is left of the hair of the human body, and some of us have more than others. But for even when the hair is gone, there are the follicles of the hair that will change and modify. This is what we call goosebumps. Okay. I don't know why they call them goosebumps. I've seen a lot of geese and they've never had the kind of bumps that humans have on their arm. But it's because the hair follicles stand up as if they were paying attention. And literally that's what's going on, is that the skin itself is paying attention, and that's why the hair will stand up on the back of the neck, it'll stand up on the arm. So begin to be aware of that. Begin to be aware of the hair, what hair there is. You probably don't have a lot until you really look, and then you say, oh, wait a minute, I really am covered with hair. Let me look at that stuff, And so we rub the arms. And what happens is that then the hairs on the arm, what little there are, begin to stand up. They begin to wake up that sensation. And so rubbing the body, in fact, is a very good technique for meditators to do that 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes into when they begin to feel drowsy and whatnot. We want to start waking that part of the body up again. All over. So rubbing the arms, taking deep breaths, reoxygenating the body, these are the kinds of things that can be done to postpone or ward off drowsiness. But eventually the drowsiness is going to win. You sit long enough, you'll go to sleep there.
As for the mudras, if you do decide to pay attention to the fingers, let's say you were paying attention to the breath, then you just switch to the fingers and do that for how long?
Play with it. Don't make it a task. Don't make it a job to do, but rather a toy to play with, so that you can move around as your heart pleases. So one of the ways of doing it, after you take a deep breath, and relax. Let's say that you do the technique then was as you're sitting down in the chair, the intention is as I sit, I'm going to relax. Sit and relax. And so after you sit, and then you take that long, deep out breath and sigh and relax. Now will come the motivation or the intention that now I'm going to pay close attention to my hands. I'm going to start watching. And here's another mudra, and that is putting all the fingers together. And now you have 10 sensation points all at the same time. Can you distinguish them? Can you play with that? Can you waken up each fingertip?
I never came to the realization myself. I read about it somewhere, and then I tested it on myself. You can only feel one thing at a time. Let's say, you have all these connections, but at one single point in time, you'll only feel like, let's say, this one and this one, then it's going to jump around, which I found fascinating. You would think you would feel everything touching at once, but if you really pay attention.
Yes, that is absolutely true for almost everyone, including all the people that have been tested in those surveys and everything. But we're in training to do more than that. We're in training to be capable of sensing a lot of stuff in a very short order, a period of time. Maybe not what you would call simultaneously at the nanosecond level, but within ordinary time frame, you would say that, yeah, I can feel it all basically at the same time. But that takes it takes right effort. It takes work to do that. This is a skill to be developed. To experience the body like this is a skill to be developed. And it's a very, very playful skill that you begin to like it. So you could call it experiment with it. To test it out, to see what I'm talking about, to start to play with the hands, you'll begin. Even if everything that I have said is wrong, still by you taking the point of starting to experiment with the hands and experiment with these things, they will give you the lessons that I want you to learn, even if the way I'm describing it is wrong. Let your hands teach you about the mudras, rather than reading it out of a book. For some reason, we have the idea that the book is some sort of authority. If I read it in a book, it must be true. But with the way that we're working with...
It was probably on Reddit.
Yes. So, beginning to work with the body also is kind of a prerequisite for learning to deal with emotions. And we've already talked a little about that, but basically what happens is that just a small feeling will arise. The feeling is of liking it or not liking it. There's also a third kind of feeling, and that is a feeling that arises. It's a real feeling. It wouldn't be a neutral. It's a real feeling, but it's a feeling of confusion in the sense that we're not sure whether we like it or not. This gives rise to fear, doubt, uncertainty, and other things like that, which are very common. But if we practice it correctly with wisdom and add joy to it, then that confusion and doubt becomes curiosity. And that curiosity then is right noble view. So let's look at this stuff. Let's see it. Let's see what's going on. Let's not assume that we know what it is because we've read about it in a book. Let's go find out.
So in this case, it would be curiosity as to what bodily sensations arise while you're describing something?
Yes, exactly. What are those bodily sensations? For instance, what in this one, can you actually distinguish? Can you look closely? See, most people, they're not looking closely. You're beginning to look really, really closely. That's the thing, is to pay close attention. So then you can say, oh yeah, I can see that now. I can understand how the mind and the hands are, let us say, just two ends of the same rope, basically.
I just wrote something down yesterday. I was just like, not journaling, but just writing what's on my mind. And I wrote down the mind, the body, and the breath are just like one knot, and you can't you can find the ends, but you can't disentangle.
That's exactly right. That's beautiful. I like that. That's exactly right. You can't entangle it, but you can find the endings. You can find right. That's good. And so this is the right way to practice. The right way is to pay attention, to wake up. That we've talked about it several times about the four skills: the skill of right noble view, the skill of Sati, to remember, and that this is the main skill that we're developing. That's why we're using these techniques of every time you sit down, every time you stand up, every time you open a door, all of these kind of events that are a point of mindfulness. Because, well, let's put it this way. If a student meditates 1 hour a day and he thinks he's getting some value out of that, and so every day he sits for 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour every day, What that actually means is that he's spending 23 hours a day in the old habits of the mind, and is only spending a little time. But if we can start practicing so that we can interrupt the old habits of the mind many times throughout the day and put new things in there over and over and over again, then it begins to build up or well up. Let us call it in the experience bank that the Buddha calls it sankara, and that there is an emotional sankara that's built up. It's mostly stored in the cerebellum in the back of the brain here. But when we store new things, we're going to store it with a new kind of emotion, a new kind of feeling. A lot of the stuff that was stored in the old days with sadness, despair, confusion, anger, resentment, wanting things that we don't have, etc. And so a lot of that stuff is stored there. We're going to now start storing a lot of new stuff that's wholesome and valuable. Okay, joy. Joy can be stored. And the more that we put joy in that, then the more likely that when we're processing or when we're seeing the outside world and making sense out of it, we'll be making sense out of it with our new data from our practice of anapanasati and the teachings of the Buddha, as opposed to processing new information with the old data that comes from childhood. That we want to process stuff with new data so that we can get new results that are closer to reality and less painful. And so by doing that, we begin to recognize, if we deal with the old stuff, then the old stuff will then process into new feelings that are similar to the old ones, because that's what we're processing. But if we don't process mentally with the old data and start processing with the new data, then the feelings that we are generating will be more appropriate to the situation that we're in. And possibly the best example of that is fear. That the self-preservation instinct's job is to keep the organism alive. And because of that, it has to kind of be on alert. And that alertness of the self-preservation instinct is registered as fear. And so if we're in the habit of operating our lives instinctually, there will be a lot of fear that's built up as a habit also. In fact, the scientists are beginning to see that stuff is actually stored up as chemicals, and that one of the chemicals that gets stored up is cortisol. Cortisol comes out of the adrenaline gland, so you know that it may not be the stuff that we want. But what they're finding is that cortisol lingers. It lingers so long that it can be detected in hair. And it stays with it, and that they also know that elderly people build up cortisol, and that one of the properties of this cortisol is that it deteriorates bone. The bones will rot. That people actually will shrivel up. The more cortisol they have, the faster that they will age. And the less cortisol they have, then the slower the body will age. And so we want to stop being afraid, because being afraid actually deteriorates the body. So how are we going to stop being afraid? By being joyful, being happy, recognizing that there really is nothing to fear, that we are not in the jungle. Well, let us say a primitive jungle to where we've got lions and tigers and huge, huge snakes and all kinds of dangerous things that we used to have to pay attention to. In fact, we don't have any alligators around here, but we've got really nice monitor lizards. Some of them are 4, 5, 6 feet long.
Snakes?
Oh yeah. This, in fact, Kopangan is, if you look at the old Thai language, it actually means Snake Island. The word ko is island, pa is forest, and nang is one of the old words for snakes. We also have the word nu. But Kopangan, yeah, the name of it is Snake Island. So we're connected. It is famous for its snakes. Though I don't think they're quite as big as they are in the old days. But meanwhile, the important point is that through heredity, through the passing down of the DNA, of the fear of being in dangerous places, and now we live in a civilized world where there's no danger. But people are constantly afraid. In fact, the politics is operated. The politicians want to make the people afraid, because if they can make them afraid, then that'll give them a motivation to vote. People won't vote on normally. But my idea is that we would have an entire election and one politician gets one vote out of the entire nation because nobody else bothered to vote. The best government is a government that everyone ignores. Because the whole idea about a government is to protect us from danger. Well, if there's no danger, we don't need a government. And yet the people in the government spend all of their time trying to make everybody afraid so that they can manage them and control them. But one of the qualities of a Buddha is to become fearless. This is the idea of becoming a lion. That you see, as children, we were raised as victims. We were bigger. Everybody was bigger than we are. We couldn't dress ourselves. We had to be taken to school. We were always ordered around. We were the only kind that the kid can be a boss is when he's a bully. Other than that, we're constantly one down with the principals and the teachers and the cops, and everybody bigger and more important than we are. So kids get in the habit of being in the one down or victim's position. The whole practice of the Eightfold Noble Path, the whole practice of coming out of suffering is to change an attitude from being a victim into being a winner, being a lion, to being fearless, which means that now we're no longer putting that kind of nasty chemicals into the body. We're not putting adrenaline in the body much. We're not putting cortisol in the body much. Because we're fearless, we don't need to go into freeze, fight, or flight. That instead of freezing, we're mindful enough to keep breathing, to take a deep breath. And we recognize there's no reason to flight because there's no place to go. And there's no reason to fight because the guy that I'm actually wanting to fight with doesn't even want to fight with me. I misunderstood his intentions in the first place. And so by paying attention to what's going on, by paying attention to the body, by paying attention to the feelings, we come to a normal, or let us say a natural, relaxed state. The normal state is to being uptight, aware, in a tense way, guarding for danger and trying to do everything that we're told to do at work, at school, everywhere. But once we see what's going on, we reverse all of that from being outside oriented. Tam is going to work.
Have a nice day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.
See you tonight. So we change our frame of reference from externally oriented because of fear to internally oriented that is peaceful, happy, and content. We change that danger from the outside to contentedness on the inside. Well, that takes a major change in attitude. That's why the attitude, right attitude, is so important on the Eightfold Noble Path. It's right up there with right view. If we have right view, we can develop right attitude.
What about situations like you're worried about someone close to you being sick, or they needed to go to the hospital, and you're just always, concerned about that? How do you, I notice I tense up a lot in those situations, and
Well, as soon as you recognize that you are tensing up, the first thing to do is to relax. The second thing to do is because you're relaxed more now, you're going to be able to make better choices and better decisions. A lot of people wind up in the hospital needlessly because the family was overly concerned.
I'm even like more talking about my dog, my dogs. You know, when
He
they
looks
would get
happy to me. He
no.
looks. I can see him right behind you there. Yeah, I can even see him with his ear cocked, so he's actually listening to what we're saying.
She just had 4 teeth pulled on Tuesday. She had dentistry work done, but in general, you know, with my previous dog, as she was getting older, there were all sorts of health issues, and I actually am impressed. I took it pretty. As the health issues were piling up, I became calmer and calmer. You know, like whatever we can do, we'll do, and it was just at the end of her long life. But sometimes when with the new dog, when things come up, I remember that tension of not knowing what's going to happen and how to approach it. And
Okay. Our relationship with animals can be extraordinarily beneficial. Um, and that we can allow ourselves, um, let's say, the freedom to explore our emotions based upon our relationship to the animals. An example of that is that the lifespan of a dog is shorter than the humans. that the average human could possibly have five, six, or seven dogs in his entire lifetime from birth to death with that dog's long lifespan, but we will have to deal with that. But like a child or other like that, other humans live about the same lifespan as we do. So it's kind of unusual for instance, a parent to have to bury a child. But if you're the dog owner, you're going to have to do that over and over and over again, and you kind of get used to it. So, what you went through and the remembers of what you went through with the dog that you're talking about, you're going to have to go through those same things with the dog that you've got now. So, that means that you can actually use dogs as a method of skill development for learning to deal with death and old age and sickness and having teeth pulled and all of that kind of stuff. They're really good, excellent teachers that way. Now, here's something that's quite amazing that many people don't quite realize, and is that when a dog is sick, the dog allows it that he is sick. That when a dog is sick, the nesting instinct takes over. It's very remarkable that Lucky here, she wants to be under my chair. And that was especially true when she was sick or injured, that they want to come and be close. But she does not want me to be messing with her in the sense of trying to, that both of them are very, very good about having ticks removed. But we got another little puppy down there, and he does not like it. You stay away from me. This is my body. Okay, so we actually have to give credit that just because this is my dog doesn't mean that that dog's body is mine. No, the dog's body is the dog's, and the dog will let you know that this is my body. You cannot be responsible for this body. And for the dog, the body is going to get sick and it's going to die, and there's nothing that you can do except to love it and allow yourself to go through the grief process. That in fact, the grief process that you will have for a dog is a very excellent grief process training period, because you're going to lose some other people too. You're going to lose your husband. You're going to lose your mom. You're going to lose everybody, and they're all going to die. Are you capable of handling that grief with nobility and joy, so that you become the matron? You become the strong one in the family when someone dies. You're not the one that breaks down and goes weird. You're the one who is the strong one at the funeral. All right. And how you can do that is by dealing with life and death as it comes. So having animals is a really valuable thing. Their dogs are excellent teachers. In fact, even the Buddha talked about that on several different occasions. He would use a dog as an example to teach the monks. And that's very, very good, by the way, for meditation teachers. They get a big idea about how wonderful they are. And I've got a big fat book, or I'm an arahat, or all of this kind of stuff. But it's kind of humbling for good meditation teachers to recognize that the dogs are meditation teachers too. Dogs are good Dhamma teachers. They teach the Dhamma very well.
My current dog, she walks very slowly and mindfully, and I wanted to get a young dog that I can go fast and exercise. This one wants nothing to do with it, so I'm forced to do walking meditation, slow walking meditations with her.
Excellent. See what I mean? You got a dog as a teacher there. And like I said, the mistake that people will make is that they think, because this is my dog, I'm responsible for this dog's body. Therefore, they take it to the vet and they do all kinds of things. To where in the community that I was raised, very few people ever go to a doctor, and a dog almost never goes to a doctor. He's got to be really, really sick or whatever like that. But then a lot of vets would rather get the money to put the dog down than have to go through. So it depends upon the situation. But say the left front shoulder was hit by a car and it was mangled, completely mangled, 4 or 5 broke, everything like that. Still, that dog does not have to be put down for that kind of thing. That it doesn't take a lot of money either, that the dog can lay, you can put it into a caster, just wrap the arm up, let the dog lay under the chair for 6 weeks or so, and it'll start getting up and moping around. It'll limp on that arm, but eventually that arm will come back good again. Dogs are like that. They seem to take care of their bodies much better. So when they're sick, they allow themselves to be sick and allow themselves to heal. Humans, oh no, I've got things to do. I've got a broken leg, but I'm going to go to school. I'm going to ride my motorbike. I'm going to do all kinds of things, even though I've got a cast from my toes to my hips. We humans are crazy sometimes, but dogs are a little bit more, let us say, closer to nature than we are. And so they can become excellent teachers. And so you're just giving an example of how the dog can be a really excellent teacher like that. Now, as far as bad teeth going, yeah, you can see that. You can recognize that the dog is having trouble with his teeth, that they hurt, he can't eat right. You inspect the teeth, you can see the teeth going bad. That's time to take him to the vet to have those teeth pulled. That's exactly correct. So we do have that responsibility of what to do. But if we're emotionally attached and emotionally upset and all of that, then we'll wind up making the wrong decisions. But if we're thinking things through and seeing how things really are, then we can give the dog just the right amount of attention, knowing that the dog also has responsibility. In fact, the dog has all of the responsibility for his body. And that the best that the human can do is just assist that along. And yet the Westerners that I've known, they think that because the dog is mine, I'm responsible for the dog's body too, instead of allowing the dog to be responsible for their own body. Dogs learn how to take care of themselves generally better than humans know how to take care of themselves anyway. So that's good. That's really good. This has been a nice session that we've had today of talking about this stuff.
Thank you so much.
And I'm really pleased with your progress too, I can tell.
Yes, it's very very subtle, but definitely noticeable. Things are changing in certain areas, little by little.
Great, good. Well, do you have any other questions?
Just quick curiosity question. So when you have students living with you, how does your day go? Do you actually like sit down and teach them, or you meditate with them? What's your day like?
Actually, what happens is that might start a conversation with one, and then the others will come, and then it will be a teaching time, or one will send an email. It's really open, but it winds up with 2 or 3 hours of actual Dhamma talk
Oh,
through the day. Plus maybe 2 or 3 other students, and I wound up teaching for 6 or 7 hours, and that's let us say a training, a training to be in teaching mode for so many hours a day. And yet, I wouldn't ever say that I was busy. Not busy, just sitting and talking, and mostly for the students. Much of the work is to be able to talk and speak the Dhamma, and to observe the students closely at the same time to make sure that they're nodding, and that I can watch for eye movements. I watch for eyebrows and smiles and frowns and all kinds of things. So paying really close attention to what the students are doing is part of that work that is done. But again, I wouldn't call it busy work. It's very pleasant. I like it. I very much enjoy speaking with the students.
great. But do you, like the people that are staying with you, do you go out with them, I don't know, on the island, or do you do any?
Actually, no. The only time that I would go out is if a student needs something. Like after I picked up Tun, I took him back to a store. He had picked up a gift of a toaster, but when we got it here, it didn't work right. And so I took him back to the store where he bought the toaster when he first arrived on the island. Other than that, not much. There's no place to go. But I do encourage the students to go exploring, to find the beach, etc. Like we're actually quite close to the beach, easy walking distance to the beach from here. And so the students, yeah, they go out on their own. And sometimes I'm looking for a student. Where is he's out? Okay, well I'll have to wait for my Dhamma talk until he gets back.
Wow.
And then I find time for seclusion. I find time to go into the room and get away from the students. That's a good time to do that, is when they're sitting or when they're talking amongst themselves. They teach each other the Dhamma.
Sure. Yeah. So nice of you to open your home like that.
It's payback time. The term is pay forward. Do you know what I mean by pay forward as opposed to pay back? Okay. The way that we do it in Buddhism is looking at the way that a child is born, cared for, raised, nourished, and taught by his parents in ways that child will never be able to repay the parents. But the child then, when he's grown up, he has his own children. Now he has that duty of humanity to proceed into the future. So how we pay our parents back is by paying for, by nurturing our own children. Now we can see that we do exactly the same thing in the Dhamma. I feel so grateful and so much gratitude to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Achan Po that when Achan Po, even though that I had, let us say, retired from teaching back in 2008 when I stopped being a monk, now Achan Po says, "Oh no, you go teach. This is an order." He wanted, in fact, we've had a long conversation about it. One time he wanted me to go to Chicago because he knew a monk there. Then he wanted me to go to Phuket because that monk moved from Chicago to Phuket. And then he wanted me to go to Koh Tao. But my wife told him, "Sorry, we're not going anywhere. We're going to stay where we are. I've got a life and he's part of my family and all of that." So I didn't know that until recently, that my wife had put a damper on Achan Po's plans for Dhamma, but we eventually settled on that the internet and Skype. Let's do it that way. Let's use technology to spread the Dhamma, and it seems to be working with hundreds of students, 200 videos, some of them 2 hours long, that the students that are here now actually came to Wat Suan Mok, and then they met Pablo at Wat Suan Mok when he was assisting there, and he mentioned me, and they had heard about me, and so they came, and they've been here for a week now. And so that's how it goes. It just it seems to be growing. Another way that it's growing is that I've actually been in contact with someone whose name you have heard, possibly, Daniel Ingram. I'm now getting a relationship on Skype with Dan Ingram. I also expect eventually to have a relationship with Chula Dasa. My position is, and I've seen this, that the Dhamma teachers in the West seem to be in competition with each other for who knows the most Dhamma, or who's got the students, or who's making the most money, or anything like that. The Dhamma, the Buddha Dhamma, Buddhist in the West, is coming to America in too much of an American way, that the teachers are not really deeply well trained enough to really be good Dhamma teachers in the West, that some of them were psychologists, and so they teach psychology, or they're teaching in that model, and a lot of it has to do with money. Not all of it, but a lot of money is involved, or a lot of, let us say, wanting to make the Dhamma a profession. And that's part of the source of the competition that we have amongst the teachers, that I can give you a whole lot of examples for, but since we're taping this, I don't want to bother, but rather to mention that what it looks like a good thing to do, that I'm working with, is to try to get the teachers to recognize that we need each other. We need to coalesce. We need to present a unified teaching body in order to really establish a Western Sangha and a lineage of Western Sangha that's valuable. Because if the students can see that the teachers don't agree with each other in their books, and then we see that they don't agree with each other when they're in front of each other, and all of the students are talking all about all of this argument and disagreement, and we've got this side, and it's just back to a good old American competition. And that we need to unify these teachers so that then the students can get better Dhamma.
Yeah, I know the situation you're talking about, and it was very disappointing to me that, these supposedly high up there teachers can't seem to get along.
Some professions are not like that. I have been around a lot of computer scientists in the early days with IBM, around working at MCI, doing things with Hewlett Packard, etc., like that. That I don't see within computer scientists high quality, high caliber scientists competing much with each other. But for some reason, Dhamma people, they really do compete with each other. And that might have to do with the fact that Dhamma hasn't really become established in the West. Maybe 100 years from now, there'll either be no Dhamma because they did not coalesce, or that there will be a good lineage formed because they finally did coalesce. And we have a special kind of job to do because in Japan, for instance, everybody is Zen and they all do Zen together. And then in Thailand, they all do Theravada together. In Tibet, they all do Vajrayana together. Chan is in China, etc., like that. In America, they've got it all. And it all comes, not just in America, but all the West. And so you've got these various traditions that we also have to coalesce. And what that means to me is that the teachers have to become friends, even though they realize that their teaching styles are different. That even though a teacher may make a mistake in the Dhamma or teach the wrong thing, it may be better to just let that be than another teacher attack him for it. that the right kind of teachings will eventually evolve out of a good relationship. The whole quality is the Kalyametta, that we need to be friends with each other. If we can be friends with each other, then the Dhamma will make it to the West. If we compete with each other and argue, and my Dhamma is better than your Dhamma, or he's teaching the wrong thing, or this meditation course is too expensive, those kinds of things will harm the the Dhamma, and has already harmed it so much that it's a kind of a sick being right now, this Western Buddhism. There are other people that are setting things up as a straw man and then just attacking everything. Like ex-Buddhism or speculative Buddhism or failed Buddhism. We've got those kind of websites, and they're not really helping because they're not offering solutions. They're just merely pointing out the problems. But what we need is not someone to point out the problems. What we need is friendship.
That would be nice.
And so this is what we're looking for there.
Very cool.
All right, well, let's close this down and talk later. I really appreciate that you called. We got some good stuff done today.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk and teaching.
Okay.
All right. Till next time.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.